Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And I apologize guys, I missed one day of Vlogmas yesterday. I was feeling a little bit under the weather, but I am starting to feel a lot better with a little bit more energy. So let's get into this tutorial here. Today I am going to be showing you how to make your fondant shiny just like the title says, but first off we are going to be starting with what I actually did with the rest of the cake. So I'm just taking my cake here, and this is a tiny little 4-inch, which I am crumb coating, and now I'm actually giving it a second coat. I couldn't decide in the beginning what I was doing with this cake, so that's why I give it so many coats, and later on here, I do end up actually coating it with some red buttercream. For this red, what I did was I did add in a little bit of Chef Master Red, and then I heated it up just a bit on a double boiler, and then re-whipped just to make sure it's a little bit more saturated. I've seen some tricks where they say to put it in the microwave and heat it up for a little bit, but I always find I go way over and then I just end up with a soupy mess. So with the double boiler system, I just put my whole KitchenAid bowl in there with the beater, put it on the double boiler for just a couple seconds, really like 10 seconds. And I have a gas stove, so it heats pretty quickly, and then I take it off and then I re-whip. And don't worry if it is a little bit soupy, you just keep whipping and eventually it will re-solidify again. I'm using American buttercream today mixed with a little bit of cream cheese frosting, and I made sure not to put this back into the fridge before I applied these sprinkles. If you do that, it's going to crust up too much and you won't be able to put those sprinkles on. If that did somehow happen, you can always re-steam the bottom edge just so you can attach those sprinkles. Now, no, this is not the same cake over again. This is actually the top tier, and this size is only 3 inches. There's only a 1-inch difference in size between the two tiers, so it does look a little bit better if you have at least 2 inches in between. But I baked a cake that was a 4-inch and a 3-inch, so this is what I'm sticking with. Then I'm just taking this and I'm putting in all of my bubble tea straws. It really honestly doesn't need that much support. The cake on top is quite light, but just in case, and this is going to be traveling, so I want to make sure that everything is nice and solidified. 3 bubble tea straws in there, giving it just a small little edge on the top, putting down some buttercream and a board, and of course the dowel here is what is most important, just in case somebody slams on the brakes. We don't want this cake flopping over. And because this is such a small cake, it's very, very easy to handle. Now I'm going in with a classic white chocolate drip, and I used Color Mill to actually color this chocolate, and it worked out really well. I had a bunch of leftover white chocolate, but they were all in varying colors. So I just kind of crossed my fingers, mixed everything up, added that green Color Mill in, and luckily it did come out with this really kind of nice forest green color, so I was super grateful. To get it nice and drippy like this, add in a flavorless oil like coconut oil and just mix it in there. You might feel like it's a lot of oil that you're adding to your white chocolate, but this is what's going to allow you to not get such a chunky drip. A few other tips that I can give you for your drip cake is to make sure that you refrigerate before adding on the drip, especially if the drip is fairly warm. The other thing that I like to do is make sure that you apply it with a piping bag. You can do it with a spoon, I just find it's a lot faster and you get a lot more control with a piping bag. And lastly, when you are cutting the hole in the piping bag, make sure that it's fairly small, especially if your mixture is quite drippy. You want to make sure that you're not applying too much. If you want that drip to be longer, you just hold it there in the same place and keep squeezing and then move on to the next place. Generally with buttercream drip cakes, I do put them in the fridge, but you don't have to refrigerate these overnight. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking some satin ice fondant in green and in red, and I'm going to create those little candies. And these little pieces are what is going to be shiny on the cake itself. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking those 2 colors. You could also add in some white, that would look really nice. I just ran out of white fondant unfortunately, so I'm left with green and red, and I'm twisting it around and then I'm going to loop it all together. And you really want to make sure that your fondant is nice and pliable when you're doing something like this. If you feel like things are cracking or breaking off, what you need to do is you need to knead in a lot more shortening into your fondant. Again, it might seem like you're putting a lot of shortening in there, but you need to make sure that the fondant is fairly malleable, and some brands just don't have that. Especially I find in the winter time, things get super hard and it's really difficult to work with. So kneading in that shortening just gives you a little bit of leeway time with working with it as well. Because as we know, if we leave fondant or gum paste out for too long, it will start cracking. And you'll notice here that I am really smoothing things out, trying to get rid of any potential cracks that have shown up in there. And I'm going to do that and repeat that a few different times. I was originally thinking of putting these onto lollipops, but you know, it was actually a really small cake, so I decided to just go with these 3 loopy candies. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that center bow. So again, taking my handy pastry cutter to create that line and then wrapping it around the cake to cover up that little section in there. Now, if you didn't want that little section in there and you wanted it to be fairly inlay without the board showing, you could just take some red buttercream and make sure to pipe it around to cover up that board. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating the bow. And again, I took my pastry cutter, made a thicker strip, and then folded it over that way and played with the center to make it look like a bow. And then I'm placing this piece on top to cover up all of those messy parts. And then I'm going to place on the little tails and ends of the bow. I always like my bow to have a little bit of movement in it, but you could definitely lay this flat if you would like to instead. And then I'm going to place the bow on. There are different ways to do this. Make sure that your bow is not too large so that it can sit on the edge just a little bit. I put a little bit of shortening on there on the back to adhere it, but you could also just steam your cake if you would like to. Now it's time to make our fondant nice and shiny. Take equal parts of corn syrup and vodka and mix it together. And there you created a little paint that you're going to put onto your cake. It's more like a glaze, I should say. And this is going to give your cake or your fondant that permanent shine. So this is not like when you freshly steam a cake and then it's all nice and shiny. This shine is going to stay. It almost looks like an edible varnish, and yes, you can refrigerate this and you're still going to get that shiny look on your cake. And I think it looks really great when you do it accented, but it could look really awesome if you do it all over your fondant on a cake. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put on some little snowflake sprinkles. These ones are much larger than the sprinkles that I've been using in previous videos, and I'm just placing them haphazardly. Now, because although this has the drip all the way around, it is fairly front focused, so I'm going to make sure that I put all of my sprinkles on there. And once again, if you find that things really aren't sticking as well as they should, then just give your cake a little bit of a steam and then everything will stick, just like when you freshly coated it with the buttercream. And there you have it, our little two-tier made up of a 4-inch and 3-inch cake with our shiny little candies. And let's get into the pricing of this cake. So I know a lot of bakers out there have difficulty with cake pricing. You guys talk about it all the time in my comments, and I gotta say that these mini cakes also are very challenging for me to price as well. The reason is because you can't really do a custom order with something so small because my bakery minimum is quite high and it wouldn't be worth it for me. So I really would only do that as a stock order. And yes, that price seems a little bit high for some mini cakes, but again, it's a 2-tiered cake and it really doesn't make too much of a difference in terms of ingredients. It's all about the time that it takes to make it. Now let's get into the subscriber submission of the video, and again, you guys know I love blue. This fault line cake is so beautiful, love the little swoops on top, and I am a sucker for a sprinkle mix. So definitely go and check them out on Instagram, drop them a like, and drop them a comment. If you want to be the next subscriber submission on my video, then please follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram, where you can either tag me in a photo or send me a photo, and any and all dessert levels welcome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!